Okay. So I'm so happy that so many people showed up for pranayama, because this doesn't attract a lot of people generally. So most of you guys are from the Ashtanga community. And Mia, are you with the Ashtanga yoga group, or are you coming from different tradition? Ashtanga yoga, okay.
Ashtanga.
Okay. Well, it was because of Magda and Nico and Mishi that this idea came to share this work. So what I wanted to do was share what I've learned through training and through my own experiences with pranayama. And I'm not sure how everybody else approaches it. I've seen different approaches, but this is how I came to find a relationship with my breath and prana. So I sent out some materials to everybody. I don't know if you had a chance to look through them. There's space for questions. We can leave the microphone open. So I'll talk a little bit at the beginning. And then each session, I'd like to introduce one or two techniques. And the hope is that in the 2 weeks between sessions, you'll have time to experiment with these techniques and see what you find. So, in this little handout I gave, there's a couple of things I want to bring your attention to. First is this word pranayama. So it's a combination of two words, prana, which is a concept of an internal experience, an experience what we call life energy. Prana in different traditions has different names. What this is, in my experience, is fundamentally an internal experience for the practitioner. And through tradition, through centuries of people working with their bodies and expressing this internal experience, we have a language of talking about it. And this language, in the yoga tradition, we call it prana. But really, it's a very intimate experience within your own body. And so what I hope to do with the pranayama series is just help you find a way of experiencing this yourself outside of the language you may have heard about it. And then when you go back to the languages, to the tradition, you might see them through a different lens. So pranayama means to expand this idea of prana, or of life energy. And the way that I was taught the sequence of pranayama in a yoga practice is the asana, the movements of the body, prepare the breath for pranayama. Pranayama prepares the mind for meditation, for one-pointed attention. And meditation prepares the soul for higher things, let's call it, liberation, all kinds of words, kaivalya. So pranayama is a part of a sequence of practice in the way that I learned it. So asana is not about the body, asana is about the breath, because the body is the mechanism for breathing. And so changing the shape of the body affects the breath. And so all of the preparation we do, particularly Ashtangis, great time to practice after the sequence to build up your breath. So what I'd like to do is start in the first week with building a relationship. So I had 4:30 this morning, for some reason I was awake, and I had this image in my head, so I'm going to share it with you because it's probably important. I don't usually wake up at 4:30. So if you imagine a dog, so full disclosure, I got a dog at the beginning of this isolation time, so I've had a lot of time to think about dogs. So if you were to walk up to a random dog, put a leash around its neck and try to take it for a walk, you might be successful, or you might encounter some resistance. If you know something about dogs and generally the way they behave, you might do the same exercise, walk up to a dog you don't know, put a leash on it, and take it for a walk. And note that dragging a dog along by a leash is not the same thing as walking a dog. So if you have a dog that you've built a relationship with, this is your dog. So there's not just dog as a thing, but dog as something that now has a relationship with you. You can use this leash to guide it in a particular direction. And if that relationship is really strong and firm, that leash is not even necessary. There's a relationship there to build it. So in this analogy, the dog is this mysterious concept of prana. The leash is the breath used to guide it. And we are the intention of where we want to bring the breath. Because prana is part of a system of esoteric anatomy. So we have the modern understanding of anatomy, and this is not that. This is how generations of people understood how the body functioned. Prana was one aspect of it. And in this system, the image of dis-ease in the body, whether it's illness or pain or suffering, is an idea that the prana in your body is dispersed or even leaking out. And the idea of pranayama is to call the prana back home to the center of the body. If you will, you can think of the heart. The beginning of this effort comes from developing the relationship. And if you look at some of the texts on pranayama in detail, I was looking this morning when I had this image as I woke up to the Yoga Yajnavalkya. And he has there's all kinds of descriptions of different techniques and different things that you can do. And many of them in the commentaries, it just says to the capacity of the student. So before we go into detailed techniques and pushing the body, it's really important to understand where your breath is and where your body is in relationship to that breath. And so that we don't confuse the situation by trying to drag a dog down the street when it's resisting. So we are working here, if we switch from the esoteric anatomy to the more modern understanding of anatomy, the shift of working with the body to working with the breath is that now we're working more intimately in the gateway between two nervous systems, the autonomic nervous system and the somatic nervous systems. So the breath is primarily unconscious. The body knows how to breathe. This is a very important resource as we start to dive in. You know how to breathe already. If you feel agitation, just go back and let the breath flow. This is the first step, actually, in the Yoga Sutras as well, before the second chapter. Watching the breath is really the first step into this game of pranayama. But then as we take our intention to shift the breath, you're switching from a habitual pattern to a conscious pattern. And this is, some of you, Penny and Nico, were at the Kriya Yoga workshop we did a few years ago. And I said this at the time too, that pranayama is the highest form of tapas, the highest form of discipline, shifting from something that you habitually do 24/7 to a conscious effort now. So, so that's the realm that we're getting into. And one of the tools that I'm going to introduce today is this little image I sent, and I'll put it up on the screen to explain it. Because breathing is just one method of pranayama. And there's a lot of time and a lot of focus spent on this, but it's one tool. There was this esoteric anatomy from which this idea comes also has images of channels through which the prana flows. And many of these channels originate in the hands and fingers, among other places in the body. And so mudra can be an important part of pranayama practice. And some of you guys have done some of this hand work with me here. So I want to work from the beginning with the tactile function of mudra. And in this case, we're going to use it as a really simple idea because you can count to 12. Everybody, assuming everybody has 5 full fingers on their left hand. If somebody doesn't, we can adapt. Okay. You can use your right hand. And if you use both hands, you can count to 144. So we'll go through that exercise and then we'll talk a little bit about the home study. Do you guys, anybody have any questions or thoughts as we go? Okay. Then let me do a screen share here. So you can see this. You don't have to look at your own image in case you don't have it with you. That's not the one I wanted. Let's try that again. Let's try. All right, some feedback here. I'm seeing, are you, oh, there it is. There's the spiral. Okay. You can all see the spiral hand, is that correct? Okay. So this is just a way to count to 12 at this very simple level, just counting to 12. We can add layers of meaning to it, and we will, because one of the most important aspects of pranayama as you evolve and develop a practice is the drishti, where your attention is. So in asana and the Ashtanga series, we have the point of focus. In pranayama, it's primarily about the point of focus. Because remember, asana prepares the breath. Pranayama is preparing the mind. So we hold the mind in focus. And so this, and this combination of techniques is a little bit to keep the active mind from wandering a bit. So if this is a new technique, it'll take some attention at first. So the way we do it is we use the tip of the thumb as the counter. And then we look at these folds, the phalanges, because my teacher's Italian. So the little folds at the knuckle of the finger. So the tip of the thumb comes to the center of the index finger. That's the first point. And we'll sort of go one round together. So you touch here, inhale here, and exhale. That short pause after the exhale, slide the finger up to the next knuckle. Inhale and exhale. Slide the finger up, feel the contact. Inhale. Exhale. Then over to the ring finger, tip of the ring finger. Inhale. Exhale. To the ring finger. Inhale. Exhale. To the little finger. Inhale. Exhale. Like kindergarten, very easy. Slide the finger down, little finger to the lower knuckle. Inhale. Exhale. One more down on the little finger. Inhale. Exhale. Then cross to the ring finger. Inhale. Exhale. Middle finger, middle knuckle. Inhale. Exhale. Then slide up the middle finger. Inhale. Exhale. The final step to the ring finger, top knuckle. Inhale. Exhale. So the image called the spiral breathing, because you can imagine a spiral that ends at the ring finger, begins in the index finger. Right? It's a form of walking meditation, except your path is very short. And this for me became meaningful because of years of practice. So it's just a way to count to 12 You don't have to buy anything. You have a hand, it's right there, no malas or anything. And it's always with you if you're fortunate. Count to 12 breaths. The reason it became sacred for me was at a time when I was very ungrounded. My friend and my teacher suggested every time I noticed that sensation to take 12 breaths. And this point on my ring finger became the symbol of home. So every time I did 12 breaths, I was home, no matter where I was in the world. And when I got married, this ring was on here too. So it sort of was a reaffirmation of the partnership that I had. So this becomes meaningful. This is the drishti of pranayama. We're going to use numbers, we're going to use counting, but those are just placeholders for something more meaningful that we can talk about later. Okay? Is that clear, the counting method? We're going to use it a lot. Good? I will take your silence as a yes, like I do in my live classes. Right, Olga? So I'm going to take that down. And so what I'm prescribing for the next 2 weeks is a really simple method. Just a quick question by show of hands. Has anybody received formal training in Nadi Shodhana technique of pranayama? Show of Magda, yes. Nico, yes. Not so, and Mia maybe. Okay. So that's an optional technique you can use here. We'll talk about Nadi Shodhana in a couple weeks, but if you something you've worked at, it's a very good technique. Otherwise, just use the ujjayi breathing, the breathing that you do when you're using asana, because everybody here has an asana practice that uses the ujjayi technique, the gentle valving at the throat. So this technique of creating the sound through this ujjayi, this slight contraction in the glottis, the flow of the breath is always controlled by the body. The sound here is used as a technique to build awareness and to build a subtlety in this relationship and the flow of the breath. So whatever valving you're using, just the reminder that the control is coming from the body. I wrote a couple words in here on the handout here from Leslie Kamenoff's teachings on the body moving, shape changing in the body as breathing. But all of you have some form of asana practice that you've done for a period of time. So I'm confident in your capacity to breathe and understand that process. But so what we'll do is either ujjayi or Nadi Shodhana technique, but we're going to do it a couple times a day. So 12 breaths. If your breath is short, will be a very short time. I'm assuming that none of you were up to like 1 breath per minute for a period of time. So it's going to be less than 12 minutes of practice. If you try 1 breath a minute, you can try that. That'll be fun. But so the technique we're going to use is something that I used. So we want to build an awareness of how long the breath is. So there's 2 qualities that I talked about in the handout, dirgha and sukshma. So long and subtle, the breath. So I had a client come to me once who wanted to work on pranayama, and he shared with me what his pranayama practice was, and it was a very, very powerful technique he was using. And when he told me what his practice looked like, I asked him if he had any physical disturbances, and his eyes got very big. I asked him particular part of the body where if there was any irritation there, and he was developing some chronic issues because he was really pushing the breath. If you imagine dragging the dog down the street on the leash, that's a little bit what it kind of looks like. So as we move forward with the breath, the first part is just to see what your breath looks like, the quality of your breath. And in particular, we'll look at the length of the breath in the first 2 weeks. Because once we have an idea of what the capacity is for our breath, how long inhale and exhale take, we can start to manipulate within that realm of what's comfortable for your body to create different energetic effects in the body. So it's not enough just to breathe deeply. It's also how you breathe. So we want to look at if the breath feels disturbed or if it feels comfortable. In pranayama practice, we're looking always for comfort in the body. If there's any agitation, anything feels uncomfortable, like feeling of maybe not wanting to hold still, something like that, that's a sign that the body isn't ready to go there. So back off a little bit. Especially the Ashtanga yogis, you have very strong bodies. You know how to focus your attention and push. So this is more of an exercise to observe. So to be the scientist and observe. And the technique I'll suggest is using something like a metronome. Or if you don't like this sound, so sound is not for everybody. So this sound took me a while to find, but this one is pleasant for me. So I have used it for a long time. This is set to 1 beat every 60 seconds or 60 beats per minute. So you can use this. If this sound becomes agitating, you have the ability to count in your head. It doesn't have to be exactly seconds. We just want to get an idea of the length of your breath. And something I included in the inhale or in the email, if you like, there's a little chart you can use to sort of make notes for yourself. If you have a journal, do that. But the exercise is simple. And I gave you 2 options. So for the people who have a regular daily asana practice, one interesting way to explore this could be to take 12 breaths before asana and 12 breaths after asana practice. The way that I sort of really dove into this exploration was the second version, which is to sit and breathe 3 to 5 times a day. So the crazy yogis, you know, who wrote the books, they say, you know, before sunrise, midday, before sunset, evening, and midnight. You know, if you're, you know, living on your own in isolation and you feel like you need that discipline, go crazy. But otherwise, 3 times a day is really sufficient. And the pranayama workshop I did a couple years ago, people found that the middle one, the lunchtime one, was quite difficult because they were out in the world. And it's a little silly to sort of like, you know, start playing with your nose and breathing in public, but we're all at home. So that might be a little easier this time. And the reason behind the timing in this exercise is just to notice how different parts of the day affect your breathing practice. So noticing how the breath responds to the time of day, how things like what you've eaten or how you're eating affects this. Just generally what you're consuming will have an impact on the energy in your body, how well you're sleeping. And at the same time, by doing this breathing practice, you may stimulate some reactions in your own body. So in pranayama, there's different effects. There's the immediate effect after the practice. There's longer term effects after 1 week, after 2 weeks, 6 months, a year. There's big propaganda for long-term pranayama practice in the ancient texts. Big promises of, you know, purifying everything and no illnesses and living a very long life. I'm not making those promises, but there are impacts. So as you start this exercise, you might notice how different aspects of your life impact the breathing. And at the same time, you may notice how the breathing might create an effect in your body itself. So we'll do together the first round of 12 using this technique. I can put the picture back up of the hand because doing this the first time sometimes takes a little bit of brain attention. And then I'm going to turn on this metronome and let you count 12 breaths, trying to use this technique. So on the hand, you're counting to 12. In your mind, you're counting the length of inhale, the length of exhale. Today, we're not going to stop the breath. It's not so important. Just inhale, exhale, and get a feeling for how long that is. Is that clear? You have a question, Richard?
Can it be an average?
Yes.
So is it, should we count how long it takes for every breath, or
So
can it be an average over all 12 breaths?
that's a really good question. I like that question. Just count each breath. When you find a comfortable maximum, try to stay with that. So ideally, and what we'll build up to next week is the vinyasa of pranayama. So how we sequence it. So through the 12 breaths, we try to find where the breath is comfortable at the maximum level. And then afterwards, just let the breath come down. Okay. So try that. If you find you're comfortable, if you keep pushing, you'll find where it's not comfortable. Come back down from that. Find where you can maintain the breath. Like if you've ever seen Iyengar demonstrate pranayama, he'll take like a 30-second inhale and a 30-second exhale, and then he'll walk away from the microphone and everybody claps. So that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the capacity to have a long extended breath over a period of time, because that builds the stamina and control. Okay, you guys ready to try it? So I'm going to turn this on. When you complete, since we're doing, I can't see your and hear your breath as well. When you complete, you can take the hands in some form to the area of the heart. And in general, I'll prescribe that as well. When you complete the pranayama practice, take a moment and bring your attention to the area of the heart where the prana has come home. So adjust the volume as you need it, and begin when you're ready with your first breath. So as you come towards the end of the 12 breaths, you're letting the breath return to a normal flow. You let go of the Ujjayi technique or Nadi Shodhana technique and just sit for a moment with the prana at home. So it's a very simple practice. You might notice yawning. I see at least one, burping, things like that. There's all kinds of tips, not after eating, best after asana practice. I say just do it and you'll find a way that feels most comfortable. If you look for the path of least resistance, look with a curiosity, what's happening without necessarily trying to conquer it or force it. Don't drag the dog down the street that's not walking the dog. So first, it's just about finding that relationship. So Richard had a really good question. So you'll find a length that works at any given point. It might be that your morning length is different than your evening length or midday. As you develop this relationship, you'll begin to understand what it's telling you, those changes in the breath capacity through the day or the quality of the breath. So for now, just take that, use the numbers. The numbers are just placeholders for mantra. So the numbers are mantra. This keeps your mind attentive. Magda and Nico, if you use Nadi Shodhana, then you have an extra thing to keep track of. So it's really asking the mind to do this, to do this. And if you're using Nadi Shodhana, there's a, Nico, I would recommend it for you. It's a more sophisticated Nadi Shodhana if you can. Use that and see what happens. So if we had 2 hours to sit, we could go into Nadi Shodhana and do that. But for those of you who have it today, you can use that in this particular technique. Mia, do you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah. Should the inhale and the exhale take the same time, or should it be different?
There's no, I'm not giving any prescribed way. So you can choose to manipulate it, but for now, we want to see what comes naturally to you. So some people naturally have a longer exhale than inhale, and some people have naturally a longer inhale than exhale. So by changing that natural flow, you create an effect on the body. But if you don't know what the natural flow is, you can't put those techniques on top of it with a clear understanding. So for now, just take those notes for yourself. Notice what tends to be longer and how that might change throughout the day. Okay. Any other questions or comments or thoughts? Notice if you kept counting, even when I muted myself to talk to my daughter for a moment, you can still hear the metronome. I can hear a metronome in my head still when I breathe after 15 years. So, but if the metronome sound, because all of us have a different relationship with sound. So if that sound becomes irritating, don't use it and throw it away. Okay? You can email me any questions. If you like, I have the capacity to create a private interface where we could write comments to each other so people can share their experiences. I could create that and email it to you. Otherwise, we can just do one-on-one if there's any questions, and then we can meet in 2 weeks to see the results of your experiment. Okay. Thank you very much. Very short pranayama introduction.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you.
Thank you.